Welcome to the Holistic Wealth and Health Podcast. Your co-hosts, Jason Smith and Bryan Bibbo, will inspire and teach you how to prosper in your mind, body, and spirit, not just your financial life. Joining forces with field experts, Jason and Bryan are here to help you focus on what matters most in your life, living well.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the J.L. Smith Health and Wealth Podcast. Today, we are thrilled to have Elizabeth Sherman on the podcast, owner and master certified life and health coach for midlife women at Total Health by Elizabeth. With nearly 2 decades of experience, Elizabeth has dedicated her career to guiding women and men through midlife, helping them surpass their health goals through customized, comprehensive strategies that consider all aspects of wellness. Elizabeth has her own podcast, Total Health by Elizabeth, the essential podcast for women ready to define their life journey. Thank you for joining us today, Elizabeth.
Thanks for having me, Bryan. I am so excited about our conversation today.
Great. Hey, let's start off. For the people that don't know you, how can we know more about you? Tell me a little bit about yourself and really the career that you went into and your life goals that got you developing Total Health.
Yeah. My story actually starts off with why I'm in this business to start with. I actually used to be in high tech, and unfortunately, in 2001, my mom passed away from breast cancer, and she was 63 at that time. And why that's important, I think, and why we're having this conversation right now is because I think that for so many of us, we spend a lot of time focusing on our retirement. She was a CPA and she had all of her finances together, and her health didn't support her retirement. And so it became my mission. I'm getting goosebumps talking about this. I'm getting emotional. And so I decided that I didn't want her to have passed in vain. And so I did everything that I could to help myself get healthier because I saw the writing on the wall. I could connect the dots. I was 33 at the time, and I could see that if I didn't change my health, if I didn't change how I was living my life, that I was witnessing my future. And I didn't want that for me. And it's become my life purpose to prevent any other person from going through that as well.
Yeah, that's huge. And thank you for sharing that journey and story with us. You brought the tears to my eyes. And as you were telling me, same thing as I could just feel the goosebumps and the hair standing up on my body. So it's an amazing journey. And for you to have the foreshadowing of, hey, if I replicate the same thing, I have similar genes, right? And this is how I'm going to end up in the long run. So that was crucial for you to be able to see it. You focus a lot on midlife. Share with me why is that such a pivotal stage in a person's journey? What's changing in their lives? Why are you so attracted to that midlife stage?
Yeah, so much is coming at us at midlife. Like our kids are getting older, they're starting to move away. And so that's changing our role as parents. And as a result, it's also changing our primary relationships, right? So if we've spent 20 years focusing on the kids move away, all of a sudden we have this partner now that we barely know. And so it changes our primary relationship. Not only that, but I think that when we get to this point in our lives, we start to notice that the dinner conversations start to change. Instead of talking about the latest clubs and all of that fun stuff, we start having these conversations about diagnoses and friends who are facing terminal illnesses. And it really creates this awakening in us about what do we want our legacy to be. And again, going back to the story about my mom, I think that for many of us, we have this idea that the American dream is work, save until you get to retirement, and then you get to live your life. And for many of us, we work, we neglect our health. We take our health for granted, I should say. It's not that we neglect it, but we take it for granted because it's always been there. And so when we retire, we expect to have the health. But unfortunately, many of us don't. We want to be able to travel. We want to be able to date our partner again. We want to be able to volunteer and do all of those things that create this fulfilling life. But if we can't do those things if we don't have the health to support it. And I know one of the things that we're going to talk about today is time. And so we feel really crunched for time. But I want to suggest that right now is one of those times that we really need to make the time to focus on your health.
Yeah. And when you define midlife, just for the listeners and the viewers out there, is it a certain age? Is it how you feel? That's where I'm a little confused on is I'm going to say 35 to 50 or 55, but I might insult someone. They're like, I'm not midlife at 35. So I don't want to go down that path of insulting anyone. I'll let you as the expert help guide me. What do you define as that midlife?
That's a really good question. And I'm laughing because it really is a hot button topic. Technically, midlife is 40, 45, if we're going to live to 80 or 90, right? But say to anyone who's 40 years old that they're midlife and they will cut your head off.
Right. Because I'm like right there and I'm like, wait, I'm midlife? Like I haven't thought about it that way.
I think it becomes something that we self-define. Another term that I was using when I was thinking about marketing myself was Gen X. And so I'm Gen X. And so people who are in that 50 to 60 age range where we really do start to go through hormonal shifts and start to slow down a little bit, that's probably who I'm really speaking to.
Got it. Yeah. So, I mean, it's really different. It was unique. Last night I was laying in bed with my wife and we were talking about the kids, and my daughter's 10 and my son's 7. And I said, in 10 years, one of them's going to be in college. She's like, Dad, has gone way too quick. I was like, we're at that mid-age, it sounds, right? I'm just tying all these things together with this conversation that you're having. But you said some hormonal changes, those kind of things. What are some unique challenges that people face in that midlife? I know you used the example of the conversations we're having at the dinner table are shifting. What are some other things that you see?
Yeah, I think that for many of us, so again, I mentioned primary relationships are changing. We're no longer having friendships of convenience. So like other soccer parents, right? Where we're meeting other people who are friends or parents of our kids' friends. And so those relationships dissipate and we're starting to ask those deeper questions like, who am I? What do I want my life to be about? What do I want my legacy to be? And who do I want to share those relationships with? One of my friends and clients talks about how we're no longer tolerant of having Chardonnay and cheese dip conversations. We want something that's deeper. We want something that's more meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are some of the things. And then also, one of the things that tends to happen in midlife is that our parents start needing us more. And so we start to realize, I think, probably our own mortality at that point.
Yeah, that's eye-opening. I like what you said about with the parents needing our help. My parents are in their 70s, and I could see that coming over the next few years here. They'll need more of my help, where growing up, you're so used to them helping you along the way, and you have that paradigm shift. So that was really eye-opening for me to hear that from you. But I want to talk about your podcast because you have almost 200 episodes now. It's been successful. The Total Health in Midlife, where you focus on women and the aspects of health. What have you found most important about this endeavor or this journey you've been on?
Yeah. So if you go back to my podcast, you'll see that the first, I think, 150 episodes are from, I rebranded my podcast and it was called Done with Dieting. And I realized when close to the end of that, I struggled with rebranding, but I knew that it didn't fit as much. What I was talking about was really talking about how not only our bodies, but how our brains change, how we change emotionally. So really more of the holistic approach. But we're also dealing with aging and how our bodies change as far as aging goes. And so all of that together really encapsulates like the message that I want to get out into the world is all of these things that become just so different for us at midlife. Whereas when we're younger, and like you said that you have a 10-year-old.
Yeah, 10-year-old daughter.
So yeah, you and your wife, you're completely caught up in what's going on for her because she needs you. There's going to be a time when she becomes more independent and you're going to have more time on your hands. She's still going to need you, obviously, because she's going to be a teenager, but there are going to be some things that start to change. Your relationship with her is going to change as she becomes an independent young adult. And so we need to change along with that. And so all of these things give us a little bit more headspace where we don't have that time to reflect as we're younger.
Yeah. And throughout your podcast and other things is you put an emphasis on time, right? How important it is, and what aspects does this come important with wellness and time? How do these correlate together?
Yeah. So there's one episode that I have that I really like a lot. It's called Health, Wealth, and Time. And first of all, I also want to mention that I deal with time management with almost all of my clients because how we manage our time impacts our ability to take care of ourselves. Okay. And let me go back to the health, wealth, and time episode though. Like we can think about our health, wealth, and time as far as levers that go throughout our life. When we're young, before we go to college and start working, we have tons of health. We have tons of time, but we have very little wealth because we're not making money, right? And then we go away to college, we start working, and we start to earn wealth, but we have very little time. We still have good health. And then as we retire, our health is declining. We have lots of time on a day-to-day basis because we're not working that 8 hours a day anymore. And we've accumulated wealth, but yeah, we don't have that health anymore. So ideally, we want to be able to preserve our health as much as we can in midlife so that we can continue to have good health in retirement. And I think that when I talk about time management, I'm not talking about being more productive, but I think that many of us take on a lot of responsibilities because we don't like saying no. And so for many of my clients, the reason that we're not consistent in our workouts or maybe our eating plans isn't because we don't know what to do. And it's not because we don't have the resources to do it, but rather because we are so exhausted after a day of everyone needing something from us that all we want to do is veg out on the couch. I do not want to make dinner. I just want someone to bring me something and have it be healthy. We'll eat whatever's in front of us, right?
At that time of day, I know what you're talking about. Put it in front of me, I'll eat it. I have enough. I need to turn off my brain.
Exactly. And so when we can create more space on a day-to-day basis, that space will allow us to take better care of ourselves and therefore give us more time on the back end when we're retired.
Right. And I think for my example of time management is I use a great example of last night is my son has football practice for an hour and a half. And my daughter and I took him there. And I said, for 45 minutes, put the timer on your watch. We're going to watch him from afar, but we're going to walk up and down the parking lot back and forth. So I think it's crucial. Hey, there's times like that where all the other parents are sitting in their chairs for an hour and a half on their phones where we could actually be getting some exercise in. So I also look at it as like having the ability to multiply your time and do those different things during when you would normally just say, I'm just going to sit here.
Yeah, that's a great strategy.
You also talk about like micro and macro time. Share us a little bit about those details and how we can visualize time differently.
There are two different thoughts or approaches when we talk about goals. There are some people who talk about creating SMART goals, and one of the acronyms or letters in SMART goals is the R. They're specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time bound. Okay. Now, that R, realistic, is a way to say, hey, we want our goals to be realistic. We want them to be achievable. But there's also this school of thought that says, make big, hairy, audacious goals, right? That we want to create goals that are huge. And so where we balance the two, and this has to do with time as well, is I like to set big, hairy, audacious goals for the next year or the next 2 years. But I like to create realistic goals for the day-to-day basis. And so it's also that way with time. So when we think about what I have to do today in terms of my to-do list and putting health on your to-do list, what is it that you can do today to just inch yourself a little bit further every single day towards that goal? Many of us, so we're coming up to New Year's, and many of us want to just revamp our entire lives and like completely do a overhaul. And I like people to actually hold back and let's start and evaluate what it is that we're doing right now so that we can add to it just a little bit so that we're not being really uncomfortable. Because what's going to happen for many of us is work's going to get busy, or our parents are going to start needing us, or our kid is going to get in trouble, or something is going to happen in our lives that requires more time for us to dedicate to that. And if our health has been particularly perched on top of our already huge plate of things to do, that health is going to fall off. And so we really want to have health as part of our daily tasks, our new normal, so that when we talk about time on the larger scale, we're talking about how much time do I have from where I am today until end of life. And so to answer your question directly, when we're talking about micro level, we're talking about the day-to-day stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But when we're talking about macro level, we're talking about what is my life about overall?
So the small changes that you can make day to day that will stick with you is the micro that will lead to the macro. But what I'm also hearing you say is, hey, New Year's rolls around every year. We have these, we'll call them the big, hairy, audacious goals that we come up with, and we're going to overhaul our whole lives, get out of that groove. But doing the macro changes in a month or two isn't going to happen. You got to commit to the micro changes every day, taking the small baby steps to get where you're going, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And so you might not know exactly. One of the things that I love talking to my clients about is I draw 2 stick figures on my whiteboard and I say, okay, this is where we are right now. And this is where we want to be, like in terms of behavior goals. We all think that we need to be drinking more water, eating all the vegetables, eating protein, sleeping 8 hours a day. And those things are great, right? We all want to strive to get there, but we can't do it overnight. And we think that we need to do all of that in order to get to our goal, whatever that is, of lowering our cholesterol or losing 50 pounds. But what if you don't actually have to do everything perfectly? What if getting halfway to that goal is actually going to get you far enough where you're like, you know what? I'm good here. I don't have to do everything perfectly.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And losing 50 pounds doesn't happen in a month or two or overnight. It's going to be some of those micro changes that we need to make along the way. And we always have in our head this perfect of those 2 stick figures. You look at that one and go, here's my perfect self, but no one's perfect. And that journey's not going to be perfect. And there's speed bumps along the way.
Not only that, but our brains are total jerks. Like when we cross the finish line, let's say that I get to that ideal like set of habits. our brain's going to be like, yeah, not good enough. Let's do more.
Yeah.
It's like Lucy with the football.
But the other thing is, I'm going to do this also, is our brains are jerks. It's like the journey is way better than the goal a lot of the time, right? All the hard work is what you enjoyed along the way. And then you get to that mountaintop and you go, oh, it's not as great as I thought it was going to be. Yes, it feels well, but what's the next mountaintop?
Yeah. Yeah. We can make that parallel between health and wealth all day long, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll be happier when I earn $100,000 or $500,000 or whatever the goal is. And then we get there and we're like, oh, good enough,
Yeah.
right?
What's the next mountain peak that I have to go to? But you lead into something great there where health and wealth do correlate. And I always like to say is health is so important because all the wealth in the world doesn't matter if you don't have your health. But how do they correlate together? What do you see in your practice?
And that's exactly it. One is when we can actually pay more attention to our health, we will lead better. We will do better in our jobs and in life. Like our emotional, our mental, and our physical health are all tightly connected. And so when we can be running on all cylinders there, if we have good money mindset, then we have nothing but to create wealth, right?
Right. That's great. Let's just say I'm midlife, right? Or right around that. What are some healthy habits that I could be doing? Is there something I need to change with my habits as I get to midlife?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I actually have an opt-in. Everyone can get it if they want to. It's called the 8 Basic Habits That Healthy People Do. And I can tell you the 8 basic habits, they're nothing revolutionary. The first one is drink water. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that you're getting enough water. Habit number 2 is eat vegetables. Habit number 3 is have protein with every meal. Habit number 4 is move daily. 5 is get enough sleep, whatever that is for you. Habit number 7 is manage your stress. That one's a little fuzzy, but it's important. Yep. Habit number 7 is eat just enough, not too much. And habit number 8 is limit treats. Okay. And so what I like to do, and those 8 habits are the fundamental of my core of working with my clients. And so what we do first is we just evaluate. How much water are you drinking? How many servings of vegetables are you eating? How much protein? How much sleep are you getting? How are you managing your stress? All of the questions. And then once we have that snapshot, we start with the low-hanging fruit. What's the easiest habit for you to tackle? Is it maybe eliminating that 3:00 chocolate-covered almond snack that you have every day? Or is it maybe getting better sleep, changing your sleep routine? So what is easiest for you? Start to adopt that, and then we can start adding to it to a place where you feel like, you know what? I'm good here. I've gotten close enough to the results that I want that health isn't as inconvenient as I thought it was or that it once was. And so this is where I want to stay. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love those. And those, while they speak to midlife, but I think they speak to all life too, right? Those 8 habits are huge. Yeah. And I'm going to tell you a story about the last one, limiting the treats. All the studies that you look at and we can read and anyone else can do it about like the excess sugar in food and how that sugar could affect you and everything else. So to the 8th habit that you mentioned. So I'm a big advocate with my children of you get 1 or 2 sugar items a week and that is it. And I'm not talking about, hey, an orange that has natural sugars. I'm talking about on that nutrition label, the added sugars. We were in Sam's Club the one day and we were looking for treats while my kids were in school for them to have. And I was like, you got to find stuff that you read the thing. It says no added sugar, right? And a lady pulled up on one of those electronic carts and she goes, you better listen to your dad. And my son's looking at her and she goes, I lost all of my toes because I didn't monitor my treats or my sugar. And that was a way of, oh my gosh, it was just that aha moment. And for my 7-year-old son to see that and not just hearing it from dad, but we got to realize what we ingest into our bodies, and water's so important. I grew up drinking sodas. That's what was in my house. I wasn't educated on these things. I thought that was just normal because it was on every TV commercial. Everyone was drinking it. It was in the house. I've totally changed to the water. I might have one small Coca-Cola a week if I'm lucky. I try to stay away from that stuff. I think those 8 habits, from the bookends and everything in between, are just crucial for everyone. And it's important to have kind of a relationship with food, right? But what does that healthy relationship look like? You talked about vegetables in there and those kind of things. Will you elaborate more? If I'm coming to see you and I'm saying, Elizabeth, help me with my relationship with food, where do you start?
Yeah, first of all, no one talks about, I want a better relationship with food, right?
Yeah.
What does that really mean? And what it really means is, what are my thoughts about food? Like, how do I relate to food? Do I use food to help me de-stress? Do I use food as a distraction? And so one of the things that I say that I help my clients with is emotional eating. Now, I don't think that getting rid of emotional eating is possible. And why is because food is emotional. We celebrate with food. And I don't think that we want to get rid of emotional eating altogether. What we want to get rid of is, like, at the holidays. So we want to enjoy everything that the holidays have to offer. We want to celebrate with Christmas cookies and grandma's special baked pie and all of the fixings that we have for those holidays. What we want to eliminate are, like, the handful of M&Ms that we eat that we don't think about, that really don't taste any different in January as they do in December, as they do in July. And so what we really want to do is we want to be more mindful about our food. And so going back to the situation with your children, one of the things that I help my clients with is really understanding what messages we received as children about food, and that there are good foods and bad foods. Because I personally say that one food isn't any better than the other. Now, my clients will say, Elizabeth, if that was true, then I would eat ice cream all the time.
Right.
And I want to offer that actually, no, you won't. That if you were to eat ice cream for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, it would probably make you feel pretty bad. And so what we can start to do is we can start to notice how food makes me feel. And I start to notice that when I eat foods and meals that are rich in vegetables, rich in protein and complex carbohydrates, that then it makes me feel better. I have a better night's sleep. Something that happens in midlife to all of us is that we start to notice that alcohol really affects us a little bit differently, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And we haven't changed. The alcohol hasn't changed, but our bodies have changed, how our bodies metabolize alcohol. And so when we talk about relationship to food, what we're really talking about is, why do I make the decisions that I make? It's one thing for me to say, Bryan, you can't drink alcohol anymore. And so what will happen is you'll go out to dinner and you'll be like, Elizabeth's not here. I really want the wine. She's not the boss of me.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to drink wine. But then what happens is you go to bed, you don't sleep really well. And when we don't sleep well, what happens is the cells in our body don't regenerate properly. And so we have trouble making energy. And the byproduct of that is that we find ourselves in the company pantry at 3:00 eating pretzels or cookies or whatever your vice is, because your body isn't making energy correctly. And so your body knows that the easiest way to get energy is through simple carbohydrates. And so it becomes this tumbleweed of issues. Whereas if you know that ahead of time, if you know that, yeah, I can have alcohol, but I think I'm going to hold back or I'm going to go in on it. And I know that I'm going to have these other symptoms later on, but I'm okay with it because I'm making an empowered choice. And so when we talk about relationship with food, we're really talking about, why do I make the choices that I'm making? And do I have all of the information in order to make good decisions for me and my body?
Yeah. Really exceptional with what you said there. And I want to talk about two things on there. And first, let's talk about that alcohol. You mentioned something about when we get midlife or later in life, alcohol affects us differently. You gave some examples, but share a little bit of more substance there.
Yeah, our bodies just change as we get older. And for women in midlife, especially, like, it really disrupts our sleep. And alcohol will also impact our hormones. So we have more hot flashes. We see that probably pretty early on, that when I have wine, all of a sudden my chest gets red and I start to get hotter. But it's just something that happens.
No, that was good enough there. And the second point I was making is of you just greatly tying this together and saying is, hey, that one little night that I'm going to drink that extra alcohol because I want to be rebellious, or I want to say, Elizabeth, you're not the boss of me, right? And I want to, but it's going to affect so many other things, right? And I think it's the same with food as we're correlating it all together. If I overeat on my food, I might not sleep well that night, or I might oversleep because I need to digest that food. That's going to affect the next day. My timing may be off. And then it just comes into a vicious cycle. So when we work on these 8 basic habits, it's like we do need to look at each one of them in a silo and then go, okay, from an Empire State level or an umbrella approach, they all affect each other.
Absolutely. So, yeah, like the 4 different areas are your eating, your physical activity, your sleep, and your stress. They all are completely connected. When we don't eat well, we don't want to exercise because our body is sluggish. We don't sleep well. And for many women in midlife, they'll find that they start to have night sweats and hot flashes because of their diet. They might start to have brain fog. There are a lot of menopausal symptoms that happen when we don't have proper nutrition. And when we don't have proper nutrition, we don't manage our stress very well either, because we're agitated. Our body's like on edge. And then it also goes the other way. When we're stressed out, not only do we make poor eating choices, we don't feel like exercising, but our body doesn't metabolize our foods properly either. And we don't feel like exercising, and we don't sleep well either. And so all of these habits, they support one another, and they also bring each other down at the same time.
No, I think what you said about menopause and how these different things from the alcohol or the food can strengthen the systems or the side effects per se as menopause. I'm going to have more night sweats. I'm going to be irritable. These things are going to happen. And if we know this data and we can pass it along to the listeners and the viewers here, that's huge. Hey, you know what you're up against. Start working on some of those habits that are going to make it better. As we've talked about all along, it's that macro time looking at it, but also that micro time. What can I do day in and day out to make the changes?
Yeah. And I want to offer that it's not an all or nothing thing. So, like for myself, I found that when I was starting to have night sweats and hot flashes, that one of the things that I did was I really started to look at my diet, and I started eliminating sugar and I started eliminating flour. Not completely,
Yeah.
but just for a period of 4 weeks. When my hot flashes went away, then what happened is I started adding it back into my diet, and I found this threshold where I could have some sugar and flour in my diet without having the negative side effects, but then having too much would start to bring the symptoms back. And so really being able to know your body and what its limits are is really important for women, well, everyone in midlife.
So I think what I'm hearing you say, man or woman, whatever it may be, is know your limits of what affects you and how it affects you and all those kind of things. And I personally, I have psoriatic arthritis, as many of our listeners and viewers know, but I stopped eating meat 7 years ago, essentially pork, red meat, chicken, those kind of things. I still eat seafood and vegetables, but I realized what that was doing to my body after I would eat a steak. Tasted amazing, right? But I was so sluggish, and it would take me so many hours to digest it. I woke up the next morning not feeling well, and I had the arthritis, which I was just prescribed a prescription along the way. And I said, I got to make a change in my life. And that was the change I made. And now my body does so much better with digesting food, and I don't feel the arthritis. I can move my hands. I can exercise properly. So it was me being self-aware. Like one of the biggest things we're taking from this conversation is be self-aware about yourself. Know the ins and outs of your body. We're not all created equal, right? One woman you talk to, it might affect them XYZ, and the next one, it might affect differently.
Absolutely, 100%. Like another example of that is dairy will make some people's joints ache, not everybody. And so being aware that, oh, I'm having this soreness in my joints, what are some of the things that might be causing that? And then being able to eliminate dairy, again, for a period of time, experiment, see if it's something that actually works for you. And if it doesn't, then start adding it back in again. But to your point about being aware of our bodies, I don't think it's uncommon for many of us to not be aware of our bodies. I remember a long time ago when I was in fitness, but I wasn't yet fully into nutrition and doing what I'm doing now. I remember being at a party and talking to a friend about, oh, I just eat brownies and I love brownies. I just can't get enough. And another friend was there listening to our conversation, and she was like, I just listened to my body. And she walked out of the kitchen, and I was like,
Yeah.
what? What does that even mean?
Yeah, did you get an email or a text message, right?
Yeah. And so what's interesting about that is that now I teach my clients how to listen to our bodies. And for many of us, we're walking around this world like head or bodiless heads. We're thinking about the past, we're worrying about the future, and we're not being present with what's happening right now. And so we find it irritating when we have to go to the bathroom. We find it irritating that I need to drink water. Our body becomes just an inconvenience to us. But the body has so much wisdom. And when we were younger, when we grew up in this world, we were taught lots of diet rules. And the diet says, eat what's on this paper. And if you're hungry, don't pay attention to your body. Drink water, right? And so that starts the disconnection between our heads and our bodies. And so what we need to do is actually reconnect our brain back into our bodies so that we can make those educated decisions about, oh, you know what? I didn't realize that beef made me feel sluggish and tired. I had one client who didn't realize that she was gluten intolerant until we started working together. She actually had celiac and was dealing with digestive issues for years, thinking that it was normal.
No, and I think you said it greatly. And one thing I've always lived by is if you live in the past, you're depressed. And if you live in the future, you're anxious. But if you live in the now, you can find happiness, serenity. You can listen to your body. It's hard to do, and it doesn't come overnight, but it takes time of reformatting your brain and listening to your body. I have two last things for you, Elizabeth. First and foremost, how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah. So you can find me on all social media channels. On Facebook, I'm at Total Health by Eliz. On Instagram, I'm elizabeth.sherman.coach. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm there, Elizabeth Sherman. And I have my podcast, which is Total Health in Midlife. And then my website is elizabethsherman.com. And if you go there, on the very front page, you can get that cheat sheet that I was talking about.
Great. And you can just Google search Elizabeth Sherman, and one of the top one or two comes up with your website. So everyone that's listening, viewers, go look at that right now. But one last thing that I got for you, and we ask everyone this, and I want to hear what you say because this has been an amazing time, Elizabeth. If you had one message you'd like to share with the world, what would that be?
Oh, I think that the message is that it's never too late to start and everything adds up. Actually, can I change it? You can half-ass your health. You can half-ass anything. You do not have to do it perfectly. And eating one meal that's better is going to make the world of difference. Is it just one in a sea of bad? No. But everything that you do, it all adds up, and something is better than nothing.
Yeah. No, actually, I like that. And I think it's profound in the sense of that stick figure thing is, what does our perfect self look like? That's not realistic. Set your expectations back. You know what? You can half-ass your health, and those little small baby steps are going to create more and amplify off each other and get into better habits in the long run.
Yeah, it's the 1% idea, right? Do 1% better every day and it will compound.
Yeah, I love it. Elizabeth, greatly appreciate your time here. Thank you.
Thanks, Bryan. This has been just a lovely conversation. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Holistic Wealth and Health Podcast. We hope we inspired you to make changes so you can live your best life. If you want to find out more about what we do, or if you want to have a holistic wealth and health financial plan, please call 456-833-7000. Please subscribe to the podcast and share it widely with your friends and family. Financial planning and advisory services are offered through Prosperity Capital Advisors, PCA, an SEC-registered investment advisor with its principal place of business in the state of Ohio. J.L. Smith Holistic Wealth Management and PCA are separate, non-affiliated entities. PCA does not provide tax or legal advice. Insurance and tax services offered through J.L. Smith Holistic Wealth Management are not affiliated with PCA. Information received from this podcast should not be viewed as individual investment advice. Product discussions and illustrations are hypothetical in nature and will vary based on many factors, including, but not limited to, age, health, product, insurance carrier, and product design. You should consult the insurance carrier website and policy for detailed information. For information pertaining to the registration status of PCA, please contact the firm or refer to the Investment Advisor Public Disclosure website, www.advisorinfo.sec.gov. For additional information about PCA, including fees and services, send for our disclosure statement as set forth on Form ADV from PCA using the contact information herein. Please read the disclosure statement carefully before you invest or send money.